Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Coe, VP of Growth at Retail Insights. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Simon. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. You?
Yeah, doing good, despite the rain outside.
Yeah,
but I'm doing good.
You can tell we're recording in British summertime because the kids are broken up, and guess what? It's started to rain.
Exactly.
We'll give you something to listen to for all those listening on journeys to and from the office or while the kids are in the playground and stuff. We'll give you some interesting insight in the conversation with Tom. So, Tom, tell us a bit about yourself first before we talk about Retail Insights. How did you get to be VP of Growth at Retail Insights, and what have you done before?
Yeah, so as you say, VP of Growth now at Retail Insights. I spent most of my career at the sort of intersection of commercial strategy, operations, and technology. I really focused on helping retailers and suppliers unlock performance through data, AI, beta execution, those sorts of things. I've been at Retail Insight about 5 years now. Before that, I was in America, used to be a runner, did my MBA out there. When I was a younger man, I worked at Sainsbury's for a number of years. So you could say retail was something I've sort of been around a long, long time. My job now is really about delivering as much value as possible for our customers, both within what we do for them already and also how we could do more, I suppose, newer things with them. I really want to be able to ask the question, how can we position Retail Insight with all of our senior and retail operations stakeholders? How can we position Retail Insight as the guys that you call when you've got a problem you can't solve internally? So you need to solve it through data analytics. Well, I'm going to give Tom and Retail Insight a call and see if they can support me. That's really what it's focused on right now.
Perfect. So worked in different countries, which I always think is fascinating and brings some different perspectives on life, doesn't it? So just talk to me a bit about running. So was that a uni thing? Was that a Forrest Gump type thing? How did that work?
It was a university thing. I was a keen athlete most of my life. I wouldn't say anymore, I'm not much of an athlete, but running was what I did at university. I went to the University of Birmingham, sort of a big heritage as a great athletics and cross-country school, and managed to go out to America for a couple of years, did a master's, and I was a steady distance runner, like a middle distance runner. But yeah, in a former life now. A former life feels like a long time ago.
Excellent. There you go. There's your fact about Tom. If you meet him anywhere, you can talk to him about running. So onto the important stuff then. So you've touched kind of briefly on you want Retail Insights to be the kind of go-to for all those organizations that want support around whatever it might be in terms of data, insights, process. But give us a bit more flavor about what you guys do, maybe some of the tech you've got before we get into the detail of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, for sure. So Retail Insight, I'd position us as world's leading in-store operations analytics software provider for retail. In other words, we're about applying really smart, pragmatic technology to help tackle the perennial issues of good shopkeeping. Questions like, do I have product on the shelf? Is my data accurate? How do I stop product going into the bin? These sorts of questions that retailers from a single corner shop on the road that we all live in to the Walmarts of the world, everybody asks them and everybody grapples with them. To achieve this, we have an arsenal of analytics products, and these are a mixture of really, really intelligent, advanced mathematics and some of the leading edge technology, AI, ML, real-time streaming and infrastructure. And these cover things like product availability, waste and markdown, phantom inventory correction and detection, online fulfillment maximization, and a few other pieces around that. And really, they are very complex products in terms of the output and what they actually do, but they're remarkably simple in terms of setup. They need the most basic data points out of the EPOS system a retailer has, 4 to 5 data points, and you can set it up and you can have an output within sort of 10 to 14 days, which is pretty unprecedented in the market. We do this with over 50,000 stores globally right now. This includes people like the Co-op in the UK, Sprouts Market in North America. Soon that'll be at sort of 60k plus. And yeah, real heritage. It's been something we've done for a very, very long time. And I think we are really seen as experts in the field, and just continue to double down on that, grow, continue to focus on what makes us great, and expand out what we can do for our customers.
Brilliant. So some of those initial questions are really big ones that people have been struggling with for a number of years, haven't they? But I suppose more so in the current cost climate, and we talk a lot on this podcast about the NI increases and national living wage and stuff, and they're all real, and they're all meant with the right intent, but they're all a cost to any organisation, specifically where you've got a big number of people, which tends to be in the customer-facing environment. So it's a true challenge.
For sure.
So one of the things we were going to focus on today, and yes, we will talk about AI as we get towards the end of the podcast, as it feels like we're obliged to do, but we were going to kind of focus in on compliance. And like you said you worked in Sainsbury's when you were younger, and I've worked in retail all my life. It is the holy grail in retail. Always has been, probably always will be, is the reality. And for those that work in retail, they'll get that instantly. For those that may be listening that don't, why is that? Well, you've got lots of people. You've got lots of physical locations. You've then got what I'd call, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, a random factor of customers, because some will interact with you, some won't, some will be nice, some won't. But you've also got people making decisions. So a store manager, unless you can really help them with a process, will make a different decision in store A than store B than store C, so on, so on. So when you're speaking with customers and your team, what do you typically see in that space around lack of compliance, or what drives poor compliance?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a huge challenge. Something that, if I think back to when I worked in a store many moons ago, you could almost see the compliance challenge as you worked on the shop floor alongside your colleagues, people that maybe weren't engaged as much on the job as the retailer probably wants them to. And that's a massive, massive challenge. And tackling it is not easy. I think particularly in an era where, as you say, labour models are incredibly tight, razor thin in terms of tightness at the moment. So ensuring that the resource you have deployed is executing the process, the tasks, the ways of working that you need them to has never been more important. Because the money you're spending on this labour, you need them to do the job you need them to do. Otherwise, that's just a sunk cost. I think there's a couple reasons for poor compliance that we see. No doubt there's many more, but these are sort of the big ones that come to mind. I think there is a challenge around process in store, and the job these associates and colleagues need to do is really complex. It's overcomplicated often. When I worked in store, it was a bit simpler. You were an associate or a colleague who worked in dry grocery. So you knew the 10, 12 hours you worked on, the products, the process, the ways of working, the picking and binning out the back, how you replenished, how you took the products back out, how you dealt with the customers, etc. With less labour on the floor, colleagues now need to do way more. You might need to replenish products, you might need to accept deliveries, you might need to shop online orders, you might need to jump onto the self-checkouts, you might need to go and collect trolleys. And amongst all that, there's new process around self-scanning in store and things like this, which is making it very noisy around process. And colleagues ultimately are trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to focus on? What are my priorities? And it's not a surprise that things get lost because there's just so much to focus on.
And I found that interesting because we've been on a journey, again, as far back as I can remember, of simplification, simple stores, one best way. I'm just quoting all the kind of strap lines I've heard across the years from various different organisations. Yet you're right, because when you reflect, actually multi-skilling I get, because why do you want just people sat on checkout, somebody who can just work in deli, somebody who can just work in ambient, whatever, because it limits your flexibility with a smaller pool of people. But then we've kind of enabled some of these people with tech that might be a challenge. They're not used to tech, don't work with tech outside of work. Then we've given them most instances Deliveroo, Uber Eats, on demand, click and collect, picking goods, returning goods. Layer on top then shrink, theft. You'll have, everyone listening will have seen it on various social media platforms, and you'll see lots of colleagues wearing the cameras now. So the environment you work in is tricky as well. It's interesting that we've probably ended up in some respects in a slightly more complex world 10, 15 years after everybody's been on a simplification journey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think a more complex world with less labour to deliver against that complexity. I think you could have had some amount of segmentation or separation of responsibilities when this person's going to be solely responsible for, merchandising, planning, and online ordering. This person's be solely responsible for fresh and produce. But now the world's a bit more challenging in store. People are wearing multiple hats and doing multiple things, which is very difficult. Very difficult.
And are there any specific examples you can share with us without kind of naming organisations?
I think a great example is sort of linking maybe the mundanity of some process into the complexity. If you think about date checking for fresh products, it's a classic example. If you work in a big sort of superstore hypermarket, you could have 5, 6, 7 aisles full of fresh produce. And your responsibility is to individually check every product to make sure that A, it's not gone out of date yet, and B, it's got a markdown, and making sure you then apply that markdown. And then later in the day, you probably need to check it again to make sure the products that have a markdown have either sold or they get a second markdown, or maybe even a third markdown. Amongst all that, you've also got to rotate products. I know as customers, we often go in and buy the longest sort of date item anyway, but colleagues bring forward the earliest date to try and encourage velocity on those first. So I think that's a classic example where it's just a very manual process and it's easy to understand. As I explained it there, manual date checking, it's not a surprise that colleagues are disengaged and compliance is poor, and you see instances where retailers get fined and trading standards are involved, all these sorts of things.
And ultimately, I know we talked about costs quite a bit. That poor, mundane process, if you're not kind of doing it properly, and we'll talk in a second about how you can fix it, costs you money because ultimately you'll end up getting fined, you'll end up dissatisfying customers and throwing the product and writing the cost off. So, if we just work that through, somebody's made the product, that company's bought it, they've then shipped it to the warehouse have shipped it to the store have put it on the shelf, probably touched it a couple of times, and then we throw it away. So it's not just it costs me, I'll make it up, £4.99 trifle, it's the layers of salary that go before that to physically get it on the shelf that you paid for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So fixing it then, so that we'll all have seen yellow labels, red labels, whatever organisation you're working in, this kind of supermarket example. How can you guys help fix it?
I think at a store level, there's an amount of diagnostic and sort of process mapping. Where are colleagues spending a lot of their time doing things that's really high frequency and could be automated or improved or augmented with technology? We talk about the idea of technology augmenting process in store. How can you create almost a bionic or superhuman associate that's got all the data, the insight, the technology at their hands to perform process to the maximum? So ultimately they're freed up to serve and sell, because that remains the big differentiator for how retailers can win. On manual date checking, the classic example would be, or can you just build a ledger, which is essentially inventory holding of what products you have, when those items expire, and then you work that into your markdown process, which you clearly already have, to say that, today, the first markdown, I need to scan 5 individual SKUs of vanilla cheesecake because I can see they're expiring today on the 31st. And then tomorrow I need to scan these items. And then you check in new items as they come. And it's a self-updating ledger system. that colleagues are responsible for, so they're buying into the process. They know that good process execution is going to make their job maybe this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon easier. So there's an amount of sort of buy-in because they know that they're going to make their lives a bit easier there. But I think it's just about quite simple technology that removes some of that mundanity, makes it a bit quicker, a bit easier, and ultimately gets colleagues a bit more engaged in that process as well.
Then that must give a benefit. So they kind of using that through your software, that must give a benefit at a central level, i.e. the head office. There must be some stats or management information that they can glean from that.
Yeah, a huge amount of insights and analytics off the back. You can see what individuals, what stores, what times of day these processes are happening. So, you typically will have a markdown period happen between hours X and hours Y. You can realize when those processes are happening out of hours. If they happen too late, you've got less time to sell products. If they happen too early, you might be cannibalizing full price sales that you might have otherwise got. And then beyond that, bringing in more ways to see what colleagues are facing in store. Are they dealing with too many markdowns? Do I need to edit my forecast and replenishment plans? Do I need to figure out better ways to improve that replenishment process to support less waste on the shelf so there's less going into the markdown process at the end of it? So huge amount. That's just sort of scratching the surface, a huge amount of opportunity to explore from a insights and analytics perspective on that side.
But yeah, and in simple terms, you can help reduce the volume that gets thrown in the bin. So that's a full on cost, and make sure that the markdowns are intelligent, priced correctly based on the, vanilla cheesecake example. So they actually sell through, but then stepping a stage back from that, stop people checking every item every day. So we're just targeting the ones that we know that need reducing. So there's a huge labour free up there. But then, back to your final point, the analytics then can start to be interrogated to say, well, why are we always reducing the vanilla cheesecake? Do we need to ship it in 3s rather than 6s? Do we need to sell it at all because we reduce more than we ever sell at full price? There's a different bits of information for kind of the ops team, the buying team, the ranging team, etc., that they can start to work with. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that root causing, diagnosing what issues consistently happen on the shop floor, and then how can I make broader enterprise-wide decisions to remove those challenges in the future? Do I need to change the range? Do I need to alter the forecast and demand plan? Do I need to change the promotional plan? Do I need to work with suppliers to alter the case pack that comes to store? Those are just a few of the examples that could be taken at a head office level to help improve things for the colleague on the shop floor.
And ultimately the customer. Good. So
exactly.
Let's talk about AI. It feels like we have to talk about it on every podcast. So what kind of are you seeing in the world of, specifically in retail AI? So any good examples you can share, any poor examples?
Yeah, lots in both camps. I think AI in retail operations, I wrote a piece about this a couple of months ago, is really challenging because there's so many issues on the shop floor you have to compete with. The chaos of the shop floor, the lack of data quality, sort of getting around those are massive problems. And I'm yet to see fully scaled AI that is autonomous and just deals with those perfectly and has no issues. It doesn't really exist.
Yeah,
I think the best examples, the most successful implementations of technology that has AI balances the sophistication of those technologies and the simplicity. So you can have the most complex, advanced machine learning model in the world, but can you deliver it to a colleague in the store in a simple, digestible way that, as we're just talking about, A, they engage with, B, makes them buy into the process, and C, directs them to do a task that they can achieve, and then maybe D, can you see the impact of the task that they've just done on the shop floor? So an example might be our intelligent inventory alerting system, Inventory Insight, which is basically about flagging potential instances of phantom or shadow inventory, essentially where there's a mismatch between PI and what you actually have in the store. This is a really advanced system. It's got, I think, 20 plus machine learning models that balance and make predictions about your inventory position across the entire shop. But it brings in really quite elegant and pragmatic analytics layer and decisions system, which produces insight in a way that is quite human. And I think that's really important. Instead of just issuing a generic stock command around, go and check this stock, Simon, it's going to give the context. This item is not sold for 5 days. It's got 20 units on hand. It sold 15 units yesterday. We think there's an issue. Really simple, digestible. Colleagues in store will probably understand and appreciate why they've been alerted to that item to check it. Because I think that's a big issue, that colleagues will get alerts from systems in store or technologies, and eventually so many bad calls, you're just going to think that every call you get from this system in the future is going to be a bad call. You completely lose the store teams. So I think that's a good example. A bad example, I think a lot of people, retailers and some vendors will deploy dynamic markdown systems. We've got a dynamic markdown capability at Retail Insight. So this is just about capturing as much margin as possible whilst minimizing waste through expiration-based discounting.
Yep.
A lot of the technologies and systems, and you can go and see some of this and experience it in some stores, but they'll deploy machine learning models that consider loads of factors. For example, the volume of full price items in store. How is that going to cannibalize discounted items? But they really fail to appreciate, I think, the full value chain in retail ops. So these systems might assume that the on-hand count for these items is correct, and it will make discounts based on the fact that I've got 20 items of that cheesecake that we talked about earlier. But really, 12 of those items are phantom, and your system's not correct. And it's making decisions based on inaccurate, flawed data. And we can all know what the outcome's going to be. Discount's going to be all over the place. And the chances are you're either not going to sell it and throw away great product, or you're going to sell it at a massive discount and potentially lose a lot of money. So I think it's how systems that are really intelligent rely on data that is flawed, is inaccurate. I think that's the big thing that we started to talk a lot about in the last sort of 12 months is there is a connective tissue between our suite of products. How can availabilities, lost sales drive figuring out what items have phantom inventory? And then how can phantom inventory level set on hand in store to drive the right discounting levels within our markdown system? And there's sort of this ebb and flow between all of them that feed into each other.
The key in it's, I suppose, something that Rethink we've learned, and there's this big unknown, I suppose, about AI, and it's moving so quickly. The bit that people don't talk about is, and I think you've just hit the nail on the head, is the quality of data that's needed to drive any algorithm, any system, AI or not.
Yes.
And the consequence of having that data not to the quality it needs. And again, I think most people listening to this that work in a retailer will have questions about data sources, quality of data, consistency of data. And until people get a grip on that, and it's gold starred, and we all know where it comes from, and the sources are reliable, and anomalies are detected and moved out or dealt with, we're not going to harness it to its full potential, because the software's there. It's like anything, it's only as good as what you feed in, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay, so we'll just close on where you are at Retail Insights in terms of using AI in products, how you're thinking about it might shape your products and therefore your offerings to customers in the future.
It's a great question. I think across a number of guises, there's probably two that really stand out. I think the first is how AI can democratize access to our insights and analytics across organizations. I think historically, BI analytics has been served and is customized in a way that works for the retailers, but AI unlocks that and creates almost self-serve for us. And I think giving our customers the chance to speak to our system, essentially, and have a semantic layer in place which makes that conversation possible.
Mm-hmm.
And an AI system that can produce a really great output throughout that conversation is powerful. If I'm sat down, I'm a retail operations leader at a customer, and I've got our availability system, and I'm sat in a store wondering why availability is so poor in this store, because the sales are fantastic. We've had a brilliant week, and you can have a conversation with our system, understand what's driving it. And I think that's really exciting, really exciting. We hear that as well, and that's something we're definitely capitalizing on. I think the other area is how AI can, to that point I spoke about earlier around diagnostics, we're doing some really great work around root cause analysis. So figuring out why out of stocks keep happening, and then making corrective action at a head office level and upstream level that essentially cancels that out in the future. AI is an amazing augmentation of that process to help us move through that root cause tree much quicker, much more elegantly, and I think get to an answer that retailers are happy and comfortable with much faster. And I think will mean that what is a very complex system in terms of root cause analysis, there's so many reasons why this might be happening, can be deployed, managed, and used in a far more efficient way, easier way in the future. And that's really exciting, I think. Those are probably two examples that really stick out, but there's many.
Yeah, no, I like those. I'm just thinking back to my store manager days. How would I feel if my area manager or somebody from the centre came in and started interrogating the stock system by asking it questions? There's nowhere to hide, right? But ultimately, if you're a smart store manager or team leader colleague, you'll have interrogated it yourself first. So
yes,
that surfacing data quickly is great. I think again, there'll be loads of organisations centrally where they're monitoring supplier performance and all those other things that go on. So surfacing that quickly, looking at suppliers with poor supply rates, all those kind of things. It'll all be happening now. I don't think anybody denies that, but getting there quicker, flagging it earlier, predicting it even, will make such a big difference to that whole end-to-end state. Yeah, be interesting to see, but I can only see positives from it.
Yes, definitely.
We'll pause there, Tom. Great conversation. Really good to hear about the great things you're doing at Retail Insights. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, find out more, have a chat about maybe how you can help, what and where are the best places for that to happen?
I would say reach out on LinkedIn as a classic one, or drop us a note on our website and we can have a chat. We can come to store, grab a coffee, walk around and have a chat about what you're facing, what you're challenged with, and see how we might be able to help.
Perfect. Appreciate you taking the time out, Tom. Always great to chat, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks a lot, Simon. All the best.